everybody. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time on a Wednesday evening to listen to this presentation. If I can just kick off with an introduction. Some of you will be familiar with what we do, but for those who aren't, just very briefly, what does Anexo do? We're effectively a one-stop shop for the victims of non-fault road traffic accidents. And we concentrate particularly on the impecunious claimant, in other words, people who haven't got any money, and people who don't have the wherewithal to provide for themselves a replacement vehicle. So, you know, they can't go to work, they're taking their kids to school on the bus. We are able to provide them with a replacement vehicle, and because they're impecunious, we can charge commercial credit hire rates for those vehicles as opposed to the spot rate that you might expect to get if you went into Budget or Hertz or whatever it happens to be. We have two parts of the business. We have the credit hire side, which I'll come on to in a minute, and the litigation side. And we use our litigators to recover the hire and repair charges from the at-fault motorists' insurers. This has historically been a direct capture business model, and it's underpinned by UK case law. There's no statute on this, but ultimately we have a number of court decisions which affirm the impecunious claimant's right to recover credit hire costs. Now, I'm just going to scoot to the end of the presentation here, just to give you a bit more detail of the way the business works. So two sides of the business: the credit hire division, Edge, which covers three key business units: DAMS, which is cars and light commercial vehicles; McCAM's, provision of motorcycles; and CAM's, provision of bicycles. The direct capture model means that we get our customers from a network of about 1,150 body shops and repairers who introduce our customers to us. We have a sales team who cover England and Wales, who connect with the body shops, and these are what my chairman calls Fred in a shed. In other words, they're two guys in some overalls with an inspection pit in a back room somewhere. I've got one. I'm sure you have as well. There are lots of them around. And when our customers go to them, because our customers tend not to approach their insurance company, there's no obligation for them to do so, and they don't approach their insurance company for three reasons. Number one, they haven't ticked the box for a replacement vehicle. Number two, they don't have no claims bonus protection. But crucially, number three, in order to keep their insurance premiums as low as possible, they will tend to have the highest excess they possibly can. So there's very little point in them going to their insurance company and saying, I've had a £500 knock to my car, when their excess is £1,000 or so. So they come to us and we provide them with a vehicle for the period until either the vehicle is repaired, or if it's a write-off, there is a check received from the at-fault insurance company. The legal services division is relatively straightforward. Bond Turner, they basically recover the hire charges and the repair costs from the at-fault insurer. Now, the reason we're different to a number of organizations who may have been in this game before is that we are absolutely rigid about it. What tends to happen is we send a letter to the insurance company saying you owe us some money. The insurance company, broadly speaking, ignores us, and rather than just sending more letters begging them for money, we simply issue them a writ. Now, under normal circumstances, a court date takes some time to come through, and during that period while we're waiting for the court date, what tends to happen is that the insurance company will eventually settle. Less than 2% of our claims actually end up in court. The vast majority of them settle before we sorry, hang on, I've done this wrong. Before we actually get the chance to go to court. Just to take you back to where I was before, apologies for that. Our most recent numbers were our interim results. We have a December year end, and you'll see a fairly gratifying plus numbers on the right hand side of that. Just a couple of highlights on this. We do pay a dividend. We're unlikely to trouble David's high income trust, but we do pay a dividend, £0.015 last year. We paid a halfpenny in the first half of this year, and one would hope to bring it up to £0.015 for the full year. We are a growth business and we are absorbing cash at the moment. You'll see in a minute that we're putting more vehicles on the road, and that is a cash absorbing process, and it uses up working capital. And the debt balance has gone up, and I'll also come to that shortly. We have been looking to increase our debt facilities. So we have a number of KPIs which we use to monitor how we're doing, specifically number of vehicles on hire. Now, I'll show you a graph in a minute which will show how we performed during lockdown, but ultimately at the period end, we saw considerable growth in the number of vehicles on hire year on year, and the average number of vehicles on hire for the first half was also up. We completed more vehicle hires than we've done before. That's up nearly 40%, and we settled hire cases at about 3,000. That's about 11.5% up. It's obvious. It's important to remember that completing a vehicle hire doesn't mean that the hire case is settled, because of the long tail we have in terms of getting the vehicle back to the customer or getting them a check for the write-off and actually reclaiming the money from the insurance company. But cash collection has been up 18%, and we are, as I say, in growth mode, so we are funding more cases. Our cases have gone up to about 4,200 for the first half. Just to compare, in 2019 we put about 6,000 vehicles on the road from 12,000 opportunities. In 2020 that was about 7,000 out of about 13,000 opportunities. So it's important to bear in mind we turn away about half the work we get offered because we don't feel that it's sufficiently nailed on in terms of liability from the at-fault insurer to make it worth our while to do so. In order to collect the cash that's owed from the at-fault insurance company, we need people working in Bond Turner, and we've been on a hiring spree for the last couple of years. We opened an office in Bolton in 2019, and we opened an office in Leeds in the first half of this year. And you'll see that we've increased the number of overall legal staff. That includes paralegals and legal assistants. And the number of senior fee earners, who are the people who do the negotiation for the settlements, has also risen by 20 to 25% odd. So here's a look at how we performed during lockdown. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that we were actually very robust during both lockdowns and during the whole pandemic. A lot of our customers, well, both our businesses, the credit hire business and the legal side, are characterized as being essential businesses under government guidelines. So we were open throughout. We had people working from home at Bond Turner. We had various measures in place at the depots for dams, but people were working all the time. Now, as you can see, in March 2020, when the lockdown first came in, we saw a drop in the number of vehicles on the road. In the week when lockdown came in, it fell precipitously, but it actually recovered extremely well because a lot of our customers remain essential workers, and they're people who have been on the road throughout. That's not only people who work in, for instance, the NHS or ancillary professions, but also we do a lot of motorbike business, and I'll come on to that shortly. And we've had a lot of delivery riders who've been out there delivering everything from food to parcels and so on. So you'll see that we had a decent recovery, and then going into the second lockdown, we had a similar sort of sign where vehicle numbers have dipped, but they've come up again very strongly. So just in terms of our vehicle split, we do about 1/3 cars and commercial vehicles and 2/3 motorcycles. There are a number of reasons for that, but ultimately a motorcycle is economically more viable for us. Apart from anything else, you have more motorcycles involved in write-offs than repairs. If a cheap motorbike gets knocked down the road, it's unlikely to be a repair. It's much more likely to be a write-off. And write-offs are better value for us because it means that the vehicle is on the road until such time as we receive a check from the at-fault insurance company. If it's a repair, it's on the road only until the vehicle is repaired and it's returned to its owner. So those periods tend to be longer, and obviously longer hire periods equal better revenue for us. So in terms of claims funded and cash collections, you'll see once again that we've had considerable growth in the second quarter of 2021, which brings us back to the kind of levels and exceeds the levels seen in the last half of 2020. Quarterly cash collections have been consistently getting better over the last few quarters. So legal services, number of hire cases funded in H1, that's up 40%, as I mentioned before, to just over 4,000, and we're settling about just shy of 500 cases a month. Now, settlements were obviously affected by the fact that courts were closed during the period of the pandemic. Most court cases were being held either via Zoom or over the telephone. Now that works pretty well in most cases. There are sometimes problems with technology and sometimes problems with the judges and technology, but it's also sometimes a problem where you have to have physical presence for things like witness statements and so on. If it's a straightforward case where it's just admitted liability and so on, that's easy. That's just our solicitors talking to the defendant's solicitors. If there needs to be a court hearing, then that's something which has tended to be held up. So we're very pleased that the courts are reopening at the moment, and we're really catching up on that settlement backlog. Despite that, cash collections were up 18% year on year. So as I say, we've been continuing to recruit in terms of our legal team, senior litigators going up fairly substantially, and overall legal staff numbers were up 28%. Leeds, which has been a relatively small office, it's got about, I think, 20 people in it at the moment. That opened at the beginning of the year, and that will continue to grow. We're pretty much at capacity in our other offices, which are in Liverpool and in Bolton. The Bolton one was opened in 2019 and really got off to a flying start. there is no reason why we shouldn't look at other office locations in due course, and we'll keep the market posted about that. Everybody is back at work. At one stage, we opened the office 24 hours a day so that people who were uncomfortable in terms of coming into the office could do so at 2 o'clock in the morning, because apart from anything else, as you can probably imagine, legal claims generate a ton of paper, and so people had to come into the office to pick up files, but taking them home worked very well. It's good, though, to have everybody back in the office. So in terms of current trading, we had record numbers of vehicles on the road. Now, as I say, the average for the first half of the year was about 1,700. Now, at the end of October, the total stood at 2,300. So we really are running at full throttle here, and the vehicle numbers at the moment are about the same as that. That's, as I say, about 2/3 motorcycles, about 1/3 cars, and that still keeps that's more or less remaining steady. The majority of our motorbikes come from Yamaha, but we are getting different makes as well, because ultimately we need bikes, so we're buying as many as we can. Something we announced to the market just the other day was a major new agreement with MCE Insurance. Those who aren't aware of it, MCE Insurance is the largest motorbike insurance broker in the UK. And this is, to a certain extent, well, it is a departure from our historic direct capture model. This is the first time we've done third-party capture. So basically, with MCE, we will be assuming responsibility for all their non-fault claims. Now, that's interesting in a number of ways. It will not necessarily lead to an immediate increase in the number of vehicles on the road, although obviously that will happen. We believe that there will be a significant increase in the cases we're being offered by MCE. What I think it does mean is that the quality of the cases are going to improve, and we will get higher value out of them. It's also worth bearing in mind that the claim is not just for the repair of the vehicle. There is also associated personal injury where appropriate, and also equipment. Equipment is important. I mean, I was just looking today, a decent set of motorcycle leathers is £350, £400. So if you get knocked off your bike and those get damaged, then there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be entitled to get new ones. The other thing to bear in mind is personal injury. Now, as you may be aware, we've not really been heavily involved in personal injury in terms of car cases in the same way that other solicitors have done. And this is by that I mean effectively whiplash claims. We've never really done those. PI is not a big part of our business. It's only when it is a life-changing or a severe accident. You'll be aware that the Civil Liability Act, which came into force earlier on this year, has basically wiped out whiplash claims. And one of the pluses about that is that a lot of our competition is basically walking away from this market because they were making their money purely out of whiplash claims. That was what they were after, and that was the reason why they provided the vehicles. Without the whiplash, they've got no interest in carrying on with the business. On the motorcycle side, however, if you get knocked off a motorbike, you're not going to suffer from whiplash. You're actually potentially going to suffer from serious injury. So there is also some personal injury potential there. Case settlements are set to increase as the courts reopen fully, as I said. Anecdotally, and I was talking to somebody the other day, I think at the moment maybe 1 in 6 of our cases as they come up is being adjourned. Now that's not brilliant, but it's a perfectly reasonable number compared with the number that were being held up when the courts were completely remote. And so the opening is going to continue, is going to accelerate, and that will be good in terms of getting our settlements up. Something which we're getting heavily involved in now is housing disrepair. I don't know if you're aware of the statistics on this, but there's about 4 million properties in social housing in the UK at the moment, and about 4.4 in private rental housing. In terms of social housing, about 12% of those properties are really not fit for habitation in some way or another, and another 5% of them are suffering from some form of damp or mold. We've put together a team to look at housing disrepair, and this I think is going to be quite a big operation for us. I think we're looking at over 1,000 cases at the moment, and that's growing all the time. And obviously, we can get some of our cases from social media, but a lot of our cases come from our historic records, because coincidentally or otherwise, a large number of our customers who may be impecunious may also be living in substandard housing. So it's a useful adjunct to that. You'll be aware that we're involved in the VW emissions case, and we are expecting developments of that in Q4. Just to recap for those who may need reminding, VW have been found liable in the UK courts as well as many courts across the world for the fact that they put in a cheat device into their cars which fooled the emissions tests. They have settled in a number of different jurisdictions, including the United States, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and so on. I believe there's a court hearing coming up imminently on this. we believe that we still have a very good chance of getting an admission from VW, which would then lead to a settlement. We have about 15,000 claimants on our books at the moment, and so potentially that could be a significant source of revenue for us, and we'll keep the market updated on news as that comes through. As COVID went on, we took a look at our debt facilities, and we have two providers. We have Secure Trust, which provides facilities to Edge, and HSBC, who provide facilities to Bond Turner. We announced this to the market some time ago with a considerable amount of detail, but basically Secure Trust has gone up to 25 million and HSBC has gone up to 10 million. We also had a 5 million loan from the government under the C-Bill scheme, and we also raised money for the VW case of 2.1 million from a litigation funder, and there's a payback ratio for them. So ultimately, I suppose the message that I would like to give is that we're running very hot at the moment. We have record numbers of vehicles on the road. We have been expanding in terms of the business. We make no bones about the fact that we are a growth business. The more vehicles on the road we can put on, the more people, the more cash that we can collect, the more lawyers we hire, the more bums on seats, the more cases we settle, and the more cash we collect. We have a backlog of about 19,000 cases, and that's been the case consistently. So we're just whittling away at that, but we're not going to run out of cases, either new or old, anytime soon. And clearly, traffic levels have returned largely to normal, and people who are colliding with other people, those numbers don't seem to have gone down. So realistically, I think that's more or less where we stand. I don't really propose to go through the numbers, but there is a presentation available on the website if anybody would like to run through it. Under those circumstances, I'd probably like to put it open to questions.
First question, given there's an unfortunate number of uninsured drivers, how do you deal with this?
In terms of uninsured drivers, so I mean, as you know, there's the National Bureau of Insurance, whatever, I can't remember the exact name of it, which runs a fund which covers uninsured drivers, and we would make a claim from that in terms of the claim that we've got against an uninsured driver who caused an accident to one of our customers.
And a number of questions about recruitment and hiring. Firstly, has hiring been more difficult? Is it difficult to get the right people? And the next part of that, as well as leads, you mentioned maybe other offices. Do you think that's something maybe this year, next year? Is that longer term?
Sure. Firstly, getting good people, we're not finding it that difficult at the moment, because historically you will notice that our offices are quite close to where defence solicitors tend to hang out, and it's interesting. We know defence solicitors because we argue with them all the time. We come up against them all the time. We've found it an interesting process to recruit them. If you're a defence solicitor, you tend to be working on pretty low margins because you're working for insurance companies. We offer an attractive package. People get completion bonuses. They also get overtime, and therefore we found it relatively straightforward to recruit really good quality people. Some of whom, let's be honest, have been a thorn in our side for a while. So it's nice to have them coming over the wall to join us. In terms of other offices, yes, absolutely. We think that there will be other offices. Where will they be? Ultimately, I would suggest they will be wherever there is an insurance presence, for reasons which I've just got into. So names that come up in discussion are Birmingham, Cardiff, Chelmsford. There are lots of places where there is potential to do that. And what we tend to do, we had a big office to start with. We had, I think, 10,000 square feet, and we filled that very quickly, and then went up to 20. Leeds is a lot smaller. We're in a Regis serviced office at the moment, but that will grow slowly. And I would suggest that we will do that in other areas. We will start with maybe 12, 20 people, and then grow out from there. But we're still on the growth path.
Super. Next question was about MCE and the volume of business that could be generating for you. Firstly, could you talk to how much business or what sort of volume you think that might be, and can you handle? Would you be able to take on a lot more business with the current capacity? Yeah,
it's difficult to quantify the amount of business that we're going to get, because, to be honest, we don't know who's going to collide with who. And by the same token, I wouldn't necessarily want to give a figure that's going to come back and bite me. But I would suggest that we should be looking at a couple of hundred referrals and introductions a month under these circumstances. Now, if you look about the number of vehicles we put on the road per year, which is about 8,000, that's a reasonably substantial increase. In terms of taking all those on, Once again, this is absolutely a back of the envelope figure, but I would suggest that the expansion would be less than the total number of cases, because as I say, if we're given the chance of being given a really high quality case for MCE, which includes personal injury, equipment damage, and so on and so forth, we would rather take that on than perhaps take one where there is a dispute as to liability and it's going to drag on and it's going to take a lot of time to establish it. So we do try and gauge. We have a team of people whose job it is to basically gauge how straightforward the accident is. And if it's, it looks like it's going to be a bit too complicated, then I think we'll pass on it. It's an interesting process actually, because they've spent many years doing it. They get people on the phone. Sometimes it's very straightforward because you have witnesses and you have an easy map to see, and it's amazing how many times the other side actually says, yes, I'm terribly sorry, it was my fault, in which case that's a relatively straightforward thing. But so it's a process we go through when we first get in touch with them to see whether to put a vehicle on the road.
A question, you might need a bit of background on this one, Nick. We had a questioner ask about the takeover that was talked about earlier in the year. Has that all gone away now? What's this current situation?
Sure. So for those who aren't aware, DBay Advisors Limited, which is a private equity firm based in the Isle of Man, bought 29% of the company off our founder and his wife. And they subsequently, at £1.50, which is a premium to the current share price, and was a premium then, they subsequently suggested a potential takeover ahead and the company at the same price of £1.50. And that did not go ahead. And, was not the right price. And it became apparent both to the board and to our existing other shareholders. They made it plain that that was the wrong price. I also think there were a number of reasons where they looked at the way they were going to fund it, and perhaps the numbers didn't add up as much as everybody would have wished. As things stand, we're very comfortable with DBay. They're a very supportive shareholder. They have the right to appoint up to 3 non-execs to the board. We've had one on the board since the original stake came on board, and we announced last week that we've appointed another one to the board. So we have 2 non-execs from DBay. I have to say I attend board meetings and they're extremely positive. They're very involved. They're full of good ideas. So we're happy to have them. As things stand, as you know, they can't make another bid anyway for 6 months. As things stand, they're happy shareholders.
And just apologies for those at home. I think we might have lost you for a little bit in the most crucial part of your explanation there, Nick. I'm afraid. But I think we kind of got the overall gist of it. Final question, Nick, is about getting hold of vehicles. There's been a lot in the press about chip shortages and cost of second-hand vehicles increasing. Are you able to get hold of the vehicles that you're after, or is that getting more challenging?
No, we are. We lease our cars and our vans, so we use predominantly Mercedes and Vauxhall, and we are able to get hold of those. Sometimes there's a bit of a hiccup in the supply chain, but we haven't had a problem with that. In terms of motorbikes, we buy our motorbikes outright with an element of HP. We've historically always had Yamaha. We're Yamaha's biggest customer in Europe. We're now actually buying motorbikes from other manufacturers as well. And ultimately, it's good. We have a lot of purchasing power. We spent £4 million on bikes in 2019. So ultimately, if there's a bike coming into the country, we tend to get the call. So at the moment, we're buying a lot. We're still buying bikes. We have a big turnover of bikes, and we're not having a particular problem.
Lovely, Nick. That's perfect. Thank you very much for the update.
No, well, thank you. Any questions? My number's on the website. Thanks very much.